about the truth, they keep the dreams at bay. Don't stand there waiting for the time to come. Come on, catch me, we got miles to run. We are alive, our skin is leaving this long. Fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision, baby, like we're running downhill. If you're able to, please stand up right now.
On the first day of the week, Mary of Magdala came to the tomb early in the morning, while it was still dark, and saw the stone removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and said to the other disciples whom Jesus loved and told them, "They've taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." So Peter and the other disciples ran. They went out and came to the tomb. They both ran, but the other disciple ran faster than Peter and arrived at the tomb first. He bent down and saw the burial cloths there, but did not go in.
We tear these curtains open, feel the light, swim to the surface, let our lungs ignite. Slip past the guards before they sound the alarms. Come on, catch me, we got miles to run. We are alive, our skin is leaving this blood. Fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision, baby, like we're running downhill.
When Simon Peter arrived after him, he went into the tomb and saw the burial cloths there, and the cloth that had covered his head, not with the burial cloths, but rolled up in a separate place. Then the other disciple also went in, the one who had arrived at the tomb first, and he saw and believed.
Someday this body's gonna come to rest, but not till the very last beat of my chest. These hills take longer than we think to get down, so I'll get used to living with my feet off the ground. We are alive, our skin is leaving these bones. Fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision, baby, like we're running downhill. Oh yeah, running downhill. Oh yeah, running downhill. Please feel free to take a seat.
Over 25 years ago, a group of people came together and dreamed about creating a new kind of church community in Loveland, Colorado. They believed church should be a gathering place where everyone felt welcomed and would experience the radical truth demonstrated in Jesus. They believed it necessary to build a church for neighbors and friends who were longing for spiritual vitality. This new faith community would create a space for individuals to flourish and use their unique talents to make the world a better, more hope-filled place. This original heartbeat still drives our church and forces us to evolve, asking new questions and generating new vision.
We see a beautiful generation of people longing for spiritual vitality and a fresh perspective. This spiritual generation, our generation, understands healthy spiritual discontentment, the trauma of religious disenfranchisement, and the necessary work of faith deconstruction. Filled with compassion, longing for justice, and dedicated to inclusion, this generation is asking tough, important questions of faith and tradition and the core of what it means to be human.
The historical Jesus offered a fresh perspective to his generation, one that religion, power, and fear often distort.
He offered an alternative path to violence, exclusion, and judgment.
A narrow path of compassion, inclusion, and grace.
A path that leads to life for everyone.
At Crossroads, we are reimagining the life of faith, not as an acceptance of a set of doctrines handed to us by those in control, but as a simple choice to follow the peacemaking path modeled by the historical Jesus, a path marked by justice, mercy, and humility, not the power, exclusion, and certainty that mark so many spiritual paths today. We believe the peacemaking path leads to the flourishing of all creation, what the Bible calls peace on earth. This is why Jesus said,
"Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God."
The peacemaking path modeled by Jesus guides us to difficult and exhausting, but rewarding and transformative work in 5 areas we call the 5 unacceptable truths. These unacceptable realities impede and break peace on earth, and so our work focuses on disrupting and rewriting them.
We're committing our resources to rewriting spiritual emptiness with spiritual vitality,
Poverty with physical and financial flourishing.
illiteracy with education and opportunity,
Fear of the other, demonstrated most often as racism, homophobia, and sexism, with inclusion and affirmation,
and finally, rewriting the truth of human trafficking with freedom and restoration.
No single person or organization can rewrite the 5 unacceptables on their own. Disrupting these living systems requires multiple organizations working together across diverse sectors, both locally and globally. We call these strategic alliances our partners in hope.
We support these partnerships through volunteering and financially supporting their work. Local partners like Loveland's Community Kitchen, Edmondson School, and Lago Vista Neighbor, along with global partners like the Happy Givers in Puerto Rico and Stay Free in Romania. All of our partners disrupt at least one of the unacceptable truths and share our guiding values.
These guiding values shape the way we create programs, engage with individuals, and work with our partners. We have identified 5 values that have shaped our community over the last 25 years and will carry us into the future. Our values of wisdom, inclusion, fun, creativity, and generosity
deeply shape the culture of our faith community and the work we do with people of all ages.
Wisdom creates a culture of curiosity and mystery.
Inclusion, a culture of safety for every ability level, age, race, gender, sexuality, economic, and immigration status.
Fun cultivates a healing culture of laughter and joy.
Creativity invites diversity and beauty.
Generosity opens up possibilities and invests our hearts into peacemaking work.
One thing we love to say around here is that peacemaking begins on the playground. The Crossroads Adventure Center staff and volunteers provide an emotionally healthy spiritual foundation for kids from birth through high school. In our preschool, weekend programming, summer camps, and school break camps, kids and students grow an inclusive, expansive, and compassionate spirituality grounded in the teachings of Jesus. You're invited to join this movement of peacemaking and see for yourself how being a peacemaker in your everyday normal life can truly make the world a better place.
Well, good morning. We just want to offer you a quick welcome, whether you're here in the auditorium, out in the atrium, maybe streaming us online, or catching us down the road on demand. Now, let me ask you, who's excited to be here on this Easter morning? Right? Yeah, me too. And really, who was just dragged here by a family member after being asked to wear something nice? It works. Well, hey, we are thrilled you're here no matter how or why you got here. Thank you for spending your Easter Sunday morning with us. My name is Michael Malasa.
And I'm Melissa Malasa. That video was a great introduction to who we are and what we're all about. By the way, can we get a quick shout out for our staff who produce that amazing digital and video content every week? They really make it look very easy. This Easter, we want you to know that love includes everyone. We know that church can be a little intimidating, especially if you've had a negative experience in the past. As you saw in the video, one of our guiding principles is inclusion. So for us, that means that everyone is welcome here, no matter your race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, ability, or socioeconomic status.
Now, if you're a parent or caregiver, first of all, we just want to congratulate you for making it here this morning. Good job. Maybe with your crew, even fully clothed, fed a little bit. Good on you. I know that's hard. We want you to know that right now, the kids program, which is birth through 5th grade, is hosting a really fun Easter celebration this morning. There's snacks and games. There's an Easter egg hunt. It sounds really, really fun. You know, Melissa, we should wrap this up and head over there.
Yet something tells me you act like a 5th grader already.
Rude. Anyway, here's what you can expect this morning. So our amazing band is back on deck after us, and then Pastor Ryan will be up on stage to share with us a fresh Easter message about how love really does seek and include every person.
But first, please know that we would love to pray for you, and we have a team of people who pray throughout the week. If you're in the room, you can write your prayer request on your Connect card, and if you're online, the easiest way to request prayer is through the Crossroads app. You can also text the word prayer to the number you see on your screen, and someone will get in touch with you. And now, if you're able, please stand and we'll continue our Easter celebration.
What holds your heart? What stirs your soul? What matters come to mind? The cares you keep, the thoughts you think, it's not all wasted time. Seek and you will find. Joy still comes in the morning. Hope still walks with the hurting. If you're still alive and breathing, praise the Lord. Don't stop dancing and dreaming. There's still good news worth repeating. So lift your head and keep singing. Praise the Lord. The years roll by. We wonder why we lost our way from home. Our Father finds the child inside. We left for growing old. Awake, 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 my soul. Sing this with us. Joy still comes in the morning. Hope still walks with the hurting.
Yeah, let's hear it for the band. Thank you, guys. Amazing. Please go ahead and have a seat. We do have a few announcements for everybody this morning. First, please make sure you've got a program. It's an excellent weekly resource for, information on Crossroads Church, who we are, and what we've got going on around our community. If you don't have one, simply raise your hand, and one of our most excellent room hosts will run one over to you, just like that.
Inside that program, you'll also find a Connect card. This card is for everyone, every week. If you're a regular attender, just please fill in your name, email, and check the box regular attender. But if you're brand new here today, please just fill in as much information as you're comfortable with. And check the box, I'm new here. Our team would love to get in touch with you, get you connected, and maybe sign you up to do announcements next week. Be sure to hold on to that card because you may want to add a few things throughout the service.
Also in the program, you'll find a giving envelope in which we've given each of you $20.
That is not how the giving envelopes work. It's not.
No?
No.
Not how giving envelope works. Got it. Okay, thank you. No, but really, giving generously is a core part of our culture here at Crossroads, and we try to make it really simple to give, whether that's through the Crossroads app or the giving envelope or other online options. Also, speaking of the app, you can find in there information like today's program and talk notes, the Connect card, and the giving tool in the weekend section of the app.
And there's one more thing we want you to know this morning, and it's a really big deal. You might be aware that here on our Taft Avenue campus, we sit on 75 acres of land. We have been in conversation with the Loveland Housing Authority to sell the unused portion of the land and donate a significant portion of equity in order to make way for an affordable housing project. This partnership is among the Loveland Housing Authority, Habitat for Humanity, and Mission Homes, and it is right in line with our peacemaking work to address the unacceptable truth of poverty in our local community.
And we're thrilled to announce on this day of celebration that the Loveland Housing Authority grant has been approved, and the sale will be finalized by the end of May. Yes, that's right. That, of course, sets the stage for Crossroads to relieve itself of a considerable amount of debt, which was a big, big goal for 2023. Final bit of good news is that that's all we have. We're out of here. The most exquisite Pastor Ryan will be up in just a minute. Thanks, everybody.
dream, broken heart, isolated and afraid. Open up, this is the way. I wanna get it through to you. You're not alone. Open hand, open heart. There's no need to be afraid. Open up, this is the way. I wanna get it through to you. You're not alone. I wanna get it through to you. You're not alone. Gonna get it through to you. You're not alone.
All right. Well, good morning. Happy Easter. What a great song. What a great message that you're not alone. You ever felt alone? You ever felt loneliness? Raise your hand up nice and high if you've ever felt loneliness. You can be in a room this full and feel lonely. Now, I'm not talking about being alone. How many of y'all like to be alone? I love me some alone time, especially these days in my life. Get some time alone, away from people, that's awesome, right? But that's not really what I'm describing here today, right? I'm describing that feeling that we get in our lives when it just feels like nobody understands us, when we go through significant events. I can remember being a young person in this line of work, and the church that I was in a small community, and it had grown kind of large. And when that happens, I know you'll never believe this or not, but in my line of work, people do get jealous of one another, and they get angry at one another, and they ask questions like, why is this happening in my church, or why is it happening in that church, and why is it happening here? And I can remember kind of going through a really kind of dark season and just feeling alone, and I ended up with this group of pastors that I got invited to kind of be around, and we were kind of talking one day in this session. I remember just verbalizing what I hadn't realized I was experiencing, that I just felt lonely. I just felt nobody was around, and just like, it was like the dam broke in that moment. Like I just immediately began to just weep and just realize that's what I'm feeling, like in this space of somewhat a measure of success, just feeling loneliness. One study put it this way. It says that isolation is being by yourself, but loneliness is not liking it. Like loneliness is not liking it. And in the story of the resurrection, we see and we understand what that must have felt like for those earliest followers of Jesus. Right? We rush into the resurrection, which is beautiful, and that's what we celebrate today. But we want to just kind of get there by recognizing that there had to have been a huge experience of loneliness in those hearts and lives. And that's a human experience, loneliness. Like that desire to not be isolated, to feel like no matter what you do or how hard you try, there still is this feeling of being alone, that no one gets you. Right now, many have said that loneliness is an epidemic here in our country. That in our culture, in our society, loneliness is overwhelming, right? More than 1 in 3 Americans are lonely, right? There was a study done by Harvard that said that number rises to 61% when looking at younger people, and 51% among mothers with young kids. Can I get an amen? Any parents with young kids? We can expand that, right? Right? This loneliness epidemic is a major concern for health professionals because loneliness has been linked to things like high blood pressure and depression, to heart disease, to stroke, and more. One literature review, right, even found that here's the reality. If you lack social connection, that can be more dangerous than smoking 15 cigarettes a day and deadlier than obesity. Like loneliness is a powerful space of darkness. And it comes into our lives through multiple avenues. There's multiple streams, right, that we begin to feel the weight of loneliness. A lot of these would be classified as trauma. We experience loneliness in grief. We all grieve uniquely and differently, so we experience loss. Even when we're with people that are grieving, at the same moment, at the same time, we can still feel fairly isolated and lonely. We can feel loneliness in the pain of failure. Anybody in the room ever failed at anything? No? All right, good. That's wonderful. Good for you. I'm happy for you, right? Failure can produce a space of loneliness, stress. Not only failure, but success. You've had a measure of success in your career, and all of a sudden you feel really lonely. People are frustrated. Jealousy starts to rage. You ever compared yourself to others? That'll start to make you feel lonely. Maybe you're here today and you don't fit the dominant way of thinking or being around you. There's this dominant way of existing in our culture, in our world, maybe even in your religious background, and all of a sudden you realize, I don't fit into that mold. I don't just kind of go along with the flow. I don't accept all these answers that have given to me by people that don't understand me. And so since I don't fit in that way of belonging, I just feel like I don't belong. Even our failures that are actual, but not just actual ones, but our perceived ones. Right? When we feel the sting of rejection by those that are supposed to love us unconditionally, loneliness sets into our hearts, our lives. And the truth is, loneliness is a big old fat liar. Right? Loneliness is just going to set in, it's going to start whispering lies. It's going to tell us, oh, this lie that something's wrong with me. That's why nobody wants to be around you. There's something wrong with you. You don't deserve love or belonging. We deserve our pain, right? Loneliness is going to tell us, well, you did this to yourself, and so you deserve it. And loneliness, without any intervention, without any moment of truth, without any moment of inclusion, without any moment of grace, leads to this horrible, horrible feeling of lostness. Just wandering unmoored, lacking direction, feeling like nobody gets us, that we don't know where to turn. And so chronic loneliness without intervention will lead to these feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. And that hits hard, and it's unavoidable in our lives. At some point in time, it's going to happen. And one reason why the resurrection stories that we have in the Gospels are so powerful and why it still resonates and why we gather in a space like this, because those stories are actual acts of intervention into loneliness and lostness into the earliest followers and friends of Jesus. And those stories of resurrection were written to encourage and to be a source of strength and hope for the earliest followers of Jesus, those early Christian communities, when they were facing their own sense of lostness and loneliness, when they were facing their own sense of persecution that nobody gets us. And so today I want to just pause for a moment and ask, what wisdom do these beautiful, wonderful stories of the resurrection, particularly in the Gospel of John, offer us today? Now, I get it. Many of you listening in, tuning in, you're here in the room. We all have a sordid history with the Bible. Right? For some in the room, it's been this source of beauty and grace and love, and you've experienced the divine. And for some, it's been a tool to oppress and tell you everything that's wrong with your life. But around here at Crossroads, we like to talk about our scripture as being sacred and it being a place where we can look for wisdom. I happen to believe that the Bible is a terrible rule book, horrible rule book. It's too ambiguous for rules. It's too far away for rules, but it is a deep revelation of love. It's a deep revelation of the human struggle to understand the divine, especially in our Christian heritage and Christian tradition. And so when we turn to the scriptures, I just want to honor that there are some of us in the room that as soon as we say the Bible, right, we automatically tense up. Anxiety sets in. But really our scripture is this beautiful record of how our spiritual ancestors made sense of the world. Right? And so if you're new to kind of thinking about the Bible or looking at it, remember it's got two big sections. We call one section, we call it the Old Testament. A whole group of people call it the Hebrew Bible. And then the second part called the Christian Scriptures, the New Testament. It's a collection. The Bible is not a book. We say it. It's just we happen to unfortunately bind all these books and writings into one source. But it's really a library, which is why it's somewhat problematic when we say, well, what does the Bible say about? Well, it's like asking, what does the public library say about investing? Right? What does the public library say about marine life? You're going to get lots of different views, right? Well, that's the Bible. It's a collection, right? And inside that collection, we have these four Gospels that tell the story of Jesus, and they're asking the question, Why was Jesus, they're answering the question, why was Jesus so important? Why was Jesus so important? And so Jesus becomes a figure, the living Christ, post-Easter, post-resurrection, becomes a source of hope and strength because that Jesus was continually experienced even beyond his death. And that's what we're celebrating today. Now, I want to look at the Gospel of John, chapters 20 and 21, the fourth gospel, the strangest of them all, right? So if you feel like you're a stranger, then you can get along with the Gospel of John. Very weird. Jesus says weird things in John, like eat my flesh and drink my blood. Like, sign me up. I'm in. Very strange stuff. Jesus in the Gospel of John says all these statements like, I am the bread of life. He doesn't say that in any other Gospels. In fact, in the other Gospels, it says that Jesus only talked in parables. In the Gospel of John, Jesus doesn't give one parable. I mean, John and Matthew and Mark, they should have got together and got themselves in alignment before they confused us for 2,000 years, right? But the Gospel of John is really about this question of what does it mean to be a resurrected person today? And that's what John was writing. He was gathering and he was making sense of the gospel stories. And so the resurrection in John is not just this proof. Oh, I'm here to prove that Jesus, his body was reanimated and resuscitated and he lived on. No, because like if that would have happened just that simply, he would have died again, right? The story of Jesus is not simply this physical body that comes back to life. There was this transformation where the historical Jesus becomes and embodies the living Christ and is now experienced even still today. And so John's asking the question, the big questions, and he's laying this out decades after the life of Jesus. Like, what does it mean to say that Jesus was chosen by God, that Jesus was exalted past death, that Jesus is resurrected and exalted to the right hand of God? What if God was left-handed? What then? Right? These beautiful metaphors that were handed and given, right? And now the form of Jesus in the Gospel of John is quite different in chapters 20 and 21 than we see earlier in the Gospel or even in the other Gospels. Like this Jesus can kind of walk through walls to be a cool trick. He would just appear and then disappear. You couldn't recognize him. So we should recognize that the resurrection story is bigger than the reanimation of a physical body. There's something more to it. And it's that something more that we continue to experience in faith, right? So John chapter 20, verse 21, these two final chapters are really interesting because it's like Jesus is on he's on a mission to go around and find all these people that are confused, that are lonely, and to say, let's get some things straight, right? And so we see him go in John chapter 20 through 21, he does kind of like a tour of inclusion, right? He does kind of a tour of finding the lost. So John chapter 20, the first place he goes is he goes back to the tomb, which I don't know that that's where I would go, right? If I'd been resurrected, I'd be like, peace, deuces, I'm gone, you know? I always think it's funny that we hang crosses. Like, I just imagine if Jesus were here, he'd be like, could we not hang the cross? Like, I really don't want to relive that moment, you know? I get why we do it, but I always thought it was kind of weird, you know? So at any rate, that's a sidebar. So first thing we see is that this resurrected Christ, the living Christ, not just the historical Jesus, not just the Jesus that walked around proclaiming a radical, different vision for God, but the living Christ finds and includes Mary in the loneliness of her grief. That's the first place we see Jesus, the resurrected one. In John chapter 20, verse 13 through 16, it says that the angels who were there, they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, which is kind of a dumb question at a tomb. Like, can we just pause and honor that one for a second? You know, these angels aren't the smartest beings in the world, right? Like, why are you crying? She's in a graveyard. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but at any rate, literature. Okay, so she says, they say, "Why are you weeping?" And she says, "Well, they've taken my Lord, and I don't know where they laid him." And when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus there, but didn't know it was Jesus, right? This is one of those weird things. Like, she can't see, she doesn't recognize who it is. And Jesus, the living Christ, says to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Again, like, you're all knowing. This doesn't make any sense. Like, tomb, you died a few days ago. It's pretty clear. "Who are you looking for?" And she thought it was the gardener. And she says to him, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you laid him, and I will take him." Like, Mary's going to lift up a dead, unanimated body and carry it by herself. Give me a break. She's crying. She's weeping. "Where is he?" And Jesus says to her, "Mary." And she turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher, my rabbi. See, the living Christ appears right to Mary in those tears of grief. Have you ever experienced grief? The loneliness of grief? But that's right where the resurrected one comes, right into the heart of her grief. and says, I'm right here. And you won't always recognize me and you won't always see me, but I'm right here in the middle of it. The next place that the living Christ goes to, right, is the living Christ finds and includes the disciples in the loneliness of their fears. I mean, the disciples are freaking out. They were part of a nonviolent insurrection in Rome. Like, they've just watched their leader die. Like, they aren't sure what's going on. And so they're in this locked room, hanging out, trying to make sense of what goes on. And in John chapter 20, verse 9, it says, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the doors were locked, because the disciples were there and they were afraid of what might happen to them, Jesus came and stood in their midst. That would mess me up for a while. That's a totally different. I always think about the trauma of the resurrection story, that Jesus is here and then gone. Right? Like if we're to take these stories literally, think of that pain. You go through loss, then Jesus is back, and then Jesus is gone again. So that's why I think it's important that we recognize there's bigger meaning here than just the literal nature, because it kind of crumbles at some point. You're like, that would be so hard, so difficult. But the story's telling us in our fears, the living Christ finds us and does this, says, peace be with you. Right in the middle of it, right in the midst of it, when you least expect it, the living Christ, if you're open to it, the living Christ will be present, the resurrected one, bringing peace into our fears. But that's not enough. John goes on and tells us there was one guy not there that day. He was out on a beer run. I don't know. He's gone. Thomas, he's out. He comes back and they say, Thomas, you missed it. Jesus was here. Worst day ever. Thomas is like, I don't believe you guys. I'm tired of you playing jokes on me. This isn't funny. Why would you do this to me? No, he was really here, Thomas. And I love it that Jesus, the resurrected one, the living Christ, finds and includes Thomas in the loneliness of his doubts. I don't believe it. No way. A few verses later, verse 26 and 27, a week later, John's a good story. A week later, 6 days. Oh, man, you should have been here, Thomas. Oh, man, you should. Oh, it's so amazing. On Tuesday, they're having breakfast. It was unbelievable. Just boom, he was here. Like at some point, you got to imagine Thomas is like, enough. A week later, Thomas is with them. And Jesus came, although the doors were locked. And he stood in their midst and he says the exact same thing. Peace be with you. He says, Thomas, it's okay. Put your finger here. Put your finger here. See my hands. Look where they pierced my side. Look at this. Don't be unbelieving, but believe. I'm present. I'm here. And that's the living Christ. That's the point of the story. What John wants to know is in our doubts, it's okay. The living Christ is not afraid of our doubts. The resurrected one is not afraid of our doubts, but will meet us right in the midst of it. Y'all ever doubted a portion or part of your faith? Raise your hand up nice and high. I'll raise up both hands. I mean, I go through every day. There's these doubts that I experience, and I have to recognize faith is more than believing propositional things. And my favorite part of the ending of John is the last chapter, chapter 21, because it's like John, who is composing and taking sources and writing the story of Jesus, he had this story and he was like, I got to put this in here, but I don't quite know how to do it, because the Gospel of John pretty much ends at the end of chapter 20. If you read it, you're like, button it up, put the bow on it, it's all set and done. And then you have chapter 21. It's like he's like, oh yeah, I forgot about this one, but it's too good to keep out. And so in John chapter 21, we find that the living Christ comes and finds and includes Peter in the loneliness of his defeat. John chapter 21 is this beautiful picture of Peter in his failure. It says that Peter decided to go back fishing. He had failed as a disciple. He had 3 times had the opportunity to stand with Jesus in the story, and he denies ever knowing Jesus. And so in that moment, after it's all said and done, Jesus comes, there's these encounters. For whatever reason, I could just imagine in the defeat of being a disciple, he just looks and he says, I'm just going to go back to fishing. But here's what's beautiful. He's a terrible fisherman. He fails at that too. The text says they're out there all night and they don't catch anything. Like he's back in it, and I could just imagine Peter on the boat doing what? How did I get back here? Man, I was just with this Jesus, and we were traveling and walking, and we spent years together, and we saw lives changed in this beautiful message. How did I get back here? And now I'm not even catching any fish. Regressing, failing. And so the story goes, and it's told differently in different gospels, but this Jesus says, hey, try the other side. Try the other side. And I imagine, from the shore, be like, seriously, who is this guy? We've been trying both sides of it. Just do it. Cast it off. Filled with fish. And Peter realizes it's Jesus, and he jumps out of the boat, and he runs onto the shore, and he's hanging out with Jesus. And during this time, Jesus restores Peter. Asks him 3 times, do you love me? Do you love me, Peter? I get that you want to serve me. I get that you want to follow me. I get that you want to go where I go. We've been through all that earlier in the story of John, but do you just love me? Because there's something about that brings the resurrected one into our hearts and our lives. Do you just love me? He says, then feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep 3 times. 3 times. And he brings Peter to this place where he asks him the first question, right? The question that began it all for the life of Peter, the invitation. After he says, do you love me? And Peter gets so frustrated the 3rd time, he's like, why do you keep asking me this question? And then he says to him, follow me. That's all you need. All you need is just to love me. You think following me is about this or that, and yep, you're going to go there, and the Gospel of John gives us a hint as to why Peter and how Peter died, and that he did get to follow Jesus into death and martyrdom. But I think the writer wants us to know that the living Christ says, your failures, your doubts, all those things, just do you love me? Because that's where you're going to encounter me, is in that love. And then if you love me, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Don't just sit and feed yourself. Feed my sheep. And so the living Christ, the story of the resurrection of the Gospel of John, is beautiful and powerful because we see the living Christ finds and includes everyone, no matter what. And I don't want us to miss that. As we celebrate this statement that Jesus lives, as we gather and we ask the significance of this moment, the beauty of the story, the beauty of the resurrection, is that the living Christ is going from those who are filled with grief and saying, I see you, I find you, you're not alone. You're here, be present, I'm with you. And then goes to those that are doubting, says, in your doubt, that loneliness, I can find you and I can see you. You're not alone. No matter what you're experiencing, no matter how far you apart, how far away you feel, I'm right there present with you. You're not alone. You will be found. That's the beauty of the living Christ that offers us. There's this beautiful musical that came out a while ago called Dear Evan Hansen. Great song in it. And this song captures this heart and this feeling and this emotion of being lost. It captures the joy and the desire and the pain that Jesus talks about in Luke chapter 15, where he talks about a lost coin and a lost sheep and a lost son. And what the resurrection reveals to us is that the nature of ultimate reality of the more, of what we call God, is ultimate love, ultimate healing, ultimate finding, and ultimate including.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? Well, let that lonely feeling wash away. Maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay. 'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, as you reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found.
There's a place where you don't have to feel alone. And every time that you call out, you're a little less alone. And if you only say the word, from across the silence, your voice is heard. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, as you reach up and rise again.
That's the story of the resurrection, and that's why that song captures the hearts of everybody that sees the musical. Because we know in the most mystical part of who we are, that part that goes beyond the particles and the things that microscopes and quantum physics can explain, is the desire to know that when I speak in my loneliness, that there's a resurrected one that says you're found. And many of us have experienced that because of the faith that says, I just have to lift my voice. I have to speak that out. And the stories are beautiful. And the resurrection is powerful, not because it happened, but because it happens every day, every part of who we are. And so if you're here today and you're feeling that loneliness and that lostness, I want to encourage you to open your heart up to this living Christ that sees you, that includes you. No matter what your background has been, no matter where you are in this world, no matter what religion or faith or family or friends has told you, there is a living Christ that says, I see you. That there's no wall that can get erected that can keep the living Christ out. So that's the beauty of the story. We get so caught up and we want to argue. Is it a physical resurrection? Where's the body? It's got to be this. It's got to be that. The point of the story is that there's no door that can be locked that can stop the love of God experienced in the living Christ to getting through. And all of a sudden you'll find in your fear, in your grief, in your pain, in your loneliness, the living one standing right there. And that's why I want to encourage you. And that's an act of faith, to believe that there is a God that is revealed in this one Jesus, that is still experienced in the living Christ as present. But maybe your experiences spiritually have left you dissatisfied. Maybe your experiences spiritually have left you disconnected or in a space of deconstructing your faith. And I want to encourage you to explore faith with a fresh perspective. Next week, we're going to launch a new series, and it's called A Fresh Perspective. And it's an opportunity for those who are experiencing this reality of there is a disconnect spiritually of what we've been handed in the way we talk about beautiful things like God and faith in the Bible and Jesus, but those no longer work for us. Because instead of producing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, long-suffering, what we were handed and how the world has evolved, now they're producing hate and violence and judgment. But they're beautiful things that we have to hang on to. So we're going to spend about 8 weeks or so exploring these big topics that are foundational to what we call the Christian faith, but look at them through a new lens, a fresh perspective. Not a perspective that's built on dogmatic, you have to believe this, you have to this, but that's built on a vision that's consistent with Jesus' vision of God, universal and compassionate and merciful, not toxic or traumatic, not desiring to keep everybody in control and submit, but to bring freedom. And so if you're feeling that space of like, I don't know if my faith can sustain me anymore, I just would encourage you to participate in a way that makes sense for you. Maybe it's just listening to it online. Maybe it's coming back as an act of like hope. Maybe you need to process through. We're going to have conversation groups that are meeting throughout this series where you can gather and just process through your own experiences with things like the Bible and words like sin and atonement and the cross. And that same week as we launch those conversation groups is another opportunity for you to experience connectedness if you're feeling a bit of loneliness, and that we have our Connect with Crossroads. If you're sitting at a table, there's a QR code. There's a QR code here. You can skip. If you're new, it's just a great opportunity to see how this can be a place where you can be found. One of our commitments is to recognize that you're seen, all of who you are. All of who you are. So if you're in that space, thinking your everyday normal, this could be a way in which you could process forward. I was reading a book to kind of help get ready for this series, and the spouse of the author of the book said, you know what, this book is really about people who are lovers of faith finding a faith they can love. I love that. I said, I'm stealing that. I am so stealing that. Because I think that's what our Fresh Perspective series is about. There's something inside of you that's just, I can't give up on Jesus. I can't give up on faith, but I have to give up on all this other stuff that maybe served me well, but it's not serving me well now. And you love faith, but you really don't love the faith as it is standing in your heart. This might be a great opportunity. And if you're here today and Easter's part of your ritual and you're following the peacemaking path of Jesus, I want to encourage you in your everyday normal life. I am a broken record. Live a life of inclusion and grace. I think that's the gospel. I don't know if you've caught on to that yet. And you will get sick of me saying it because I think that's the gospel. I think that's the whole point. For God so loved the world that it is this God of inclusion, and it is the radical way in which Jesus shows that there is nothing necessary or needed. There's no mediation, there's no religion, there's no rules. That's what love does. That's what God is. And so if you're following that peacemaking path, remember rule number 1 of our rule of life, that peacemaking, the way of peace that we spent time on. What's rule number 1? Daily choose to follow Jesus. Walk the narrow path of loving mercy, doing justice, and living sacrificially. That's the narrow path. That's the alternative way of Jesus. Now, here's the thing. Inclusion is going to look different for everybody in all of our circumstances, and we have to deal with safety, emotional safety, relational safety. Someone harms us and hurts us. I'm not saying that the gospel is, well, just like forget it. Let them come back into your life and roll over you again and just deal with that. No. Like there's healthy inclusion, right? But at a minimum, maybe those folks that we wrestle with how to include them into our lives, maybe at a minimum we can just include them in our prayers. We just include them in our desire to be a loving person, for them to experience love. We can include people that are hard and difficult to include just at the level of kindness. And see, the world is accelerated forward into goodness. Why? When we live in this space and we recognize that the living Christ, the resurrected one, is finding and including, finding and including, finding and including. Healing. And the role of the church, the local church, is to be that extension, that embodiment of where people can be found. That space where people can be seen. And when that happens, when we create that place where love includes everyone, peace flourishes. And that's the point of it all. We gathered a few months ago at Christmas time, And we celebrated the story of the announcement of peace on earth. It's what it's all about. And when love includes everyone, peace flourishes. Because understanding flourishes in that moment, and understanding heals our wounds. Understanding heals our wounds when love includes everyone. When I recognize that I need that other in my life to help me grow in my compassion and my grace and my mercy, that's what happens. So as we head out of here, as we wrap up and celebrate and go have lunch and eat lamb and mint jelly or whatever it is you do, let me just ask this question. What is it that the living Jesus is inviting you into today? Inside your program, there's a Connect card. We love it when everybody fills one of those. That's like your Easter gift to me if you'll fill out that Connect card. And there's some next steps on the back. Maybe you're kind of brand new to this whole faith thing, but there's something about exploring faith from a fresh perspective, right? There's a little checkbox there. If you just check that box, we'll make sure you get information about that. Just participate. It's just this way of saying, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. Maybe you love the idea of being able to join a conversation group and process through some of the experiences you've had with faith and these big ideas. There's a next step right there that will just send you information about those conversation groups and how to participate in one of those. Maybe you're here today and you're in that space of loneliness and lostness. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's failure. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's success. I have no idea. In this moment, maybe the living Christ is just inviting you to reach out to someone, to trust that this is a place where you can be seen and found. And while I want you to have that experience in a beautiful way in this moment, I also want you to have it in a beautiful way with this place, this group of people here called Crossroads Church. And so if you'd like to speak with one of our care ministers about that loneliness and that lostness, that feeling that you can't get away, you can be found. There is a hand to reach out and hold with you. If you check that box, one of our care ministers will reach out so that you can do that. So in just a moment, we'll receive our donations and offerings. The offering envelopes are there, the Connect cards. The room host will be up in a minute. But just take a moment, finish filling out that Connect card. If you missed the basket or whatever, we've got the orange boxes that you can drop them in. This is the point of the resurrection. It's not to simply proclaim a static truth that Jesus is alive, but it's to recognize there's an invitation that Jesus lives and that we can focus our lives and live in that experience, and that we can trust that the living Christ, through the church, through our friends, through our counselors, through our family, can be present with us, even though we might think it's just the gardener, even though we might think we missed out on it, even though we might think we're failures because we've denied it and we've walked away. It's just about love, and love doesn't always make sense. Let me pray for you. God, we gather to celebrate this beautiful mystery of resurrected life. And will the Spirit of the living Christ, will you be present in our loneliness and in our lostness, in our grief and our doubt, in our failings, in our fears. May we know that we're found in you, and may we have the faith to believe it. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to invite our room host to come receive the Connect cards and the offering. I'll be back in just a moment for our blessing for this week ahead.
The dark comes crashing through, when you need someone to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So when the sun comes streaming in, you'll touch up and rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. You will be found.
Will you stand with me for our blessing today? It's something we do around here every week as we head out. Just speak a little truth. We all know that we're going to go and experience a whole lot of lies about ourselves this week, and maybe this is just a little bit of truth to speak into that. You're invited to lift your arms as just a way of embodying this blessing and receiving it into that part of you that is eternal. So this week, as you leave this Easter celebration, may you know that you are found and loved, and that you are included in God's call to love and care for our world. And may you feel the truth of the resurrection and know at the level of your soul the peace and power that comes in believing that Jesus lives. And may we all be resurrected ones, living to love and include those excluded, that our words and actions might be a source of healing and restoration for the brokenhearted. And if you're here today, if you've come into this place and you've been feeling that darkness of loneliness and lostness, may today be the beginning of your sunrise. May it be a dawn of sorts where you can begin to feel the warmth of the radical love of God on your soul. And may we as Crossroads Church, through the power of the living Christ, live, as our opening song said, alive, as if our skin is leaving these bones. That we would live like fire in the wind, a love burning out of control. May we be children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision like we're running downhill. And may that vision that we chase downhill for all of us be the peacemaking path of Jesus and the restoration of this world. Amen. Amen. Happy Easter. Have an awesome week, everyone.
Flashes of doubt, they go into a rage. Locked out the truth that keep your dreams at bay. Don't stand there waiting for the time to come. Come on, catch me, we got miles to run. We are alive, our skin is leaving these bones. Fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision, baby, like we're running downhill. Ooh, yeah, 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 ooh, yeah, 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 ooh, yeah, 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 ooh, yeah, yeah, We tear these curtains open, feel the light. Swim to the surface, let our lungs ignite. Slip past the guards before they sound the alarm. Come on, catch me, we got miles to run. We are alive, our skin is leaving these bones. Fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children chasing wondrous thrills, chasing a vision, baby, like we're running downhill. Ooh, yeah, 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 ooh, yeah, 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 ooh, yeah, yeah, Someday this body's gonna come to rest, but not till the very last beat of my chest. These hills take longer than we think to get down, so I'll get used to living with my feet off the ground. We are the lava skins leaving these bones, fire in the wind, we're burning out of control. We are the children